On this episode, we have Kaitlyn Kenealy come back and we dive into boundaries, friendship, and the importance of creating community in mental health.
You're listening to the Red Couch Rebels, a safe, comfy space for vulnerability and self-growth. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Erin.
We are seekers and self-advocates.
Yeah, we're not your doctors.
Or your therapists.
No, we're just fellow seekers on our own journeys of self-discovery.
Explore your inner rebel with us.
Let's sink in.
We are back with Kaitlyn Kenealy, author, psychotherapist. If you have not listened to part 1, jump on over and listen to part 1, but this is part 2. And today we are going to be discussing mental health, a little bit about community and connection around that.
Sure.
And I think more about your realm as an author. I have some questions around that.
Yeah.
Okay. I am ready.
Great. Thanks for being with us again today.
Well, we briefly just want to touch on your newest project real quick is your mental health mall, very beginning stages, right in Fond du Lac. But I'm really curious about the why for it and a little bit of explain the structure of what is a mental health mall, as a concept, and why do you think it's needed?
Yeah, so the concept is really rooted in putting patient care back into patient hands and not just saying it, but actually being about it. So mental health, we know, combines so many factors, right? Whether that's physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual. And I think we just need to be a little bit more creative and inventive on how we go about it. We have seen the rise in mental health since COVID, and it's not stopping. Right. And so when I think about that, just the way I thought about my book, right, to me, my book was really about how can I get something that's tangible and practical into people's homes if we can't get them into the office. So now I'm taking a different approach and trying to be strategic and conceptualize how we integrate all of the things that are mental health, not just therapy sitting into a room, but how then can, and not just with me, but with other people, so that you can actually have a patient reach more than just their therapeutic goals. Maybe it's their spiritual goals. Maybe it is their physical goals. And how do we facilitate that in a way that is truly comprehensive? So it's totally in the baby infrastructure phases, but I'm very excited about what can unfold. And again, taking that concept similar to my book is what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so I love that you say it like they have these goals, physical goals, spiritual goals, mental health goals. And I think what a lot of people do not realize is that all of those goals are interconnected. They are all threads of the same tapestry that is you. So when you are pulling on a thread to tighten a thread in your physical health, you are helping your mental health, right? So I love that it is interconnecting and supporting their whole self instead of just focusing on the mind, because spirituality for me has been key in healing my mental health issues, right? So I love the idea of having it all in the same building. Kind of reminds me of Keter Hagen's Center for Spirituality and Healing had a lot of that too. This seems like there's a twist to it here. I'm not exactly sure what the differences are going to be, but I love that you're bringing it all into the same building. And are you also hoping to create a community out of that?
Yeah, so like memberships, so that eventually, because there's different stages of therapy. So once you get to maintenance stage, right? Maybe you just want to be a member. Maybe you want to be a part of this so that you're still a part of it, yet you get to kind of decide what that looks like. So absolutely, that is the hope.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's progressive, and we know things are changing. So do I know what I'm doing? Totally? No. But I think that correlates with the rebel piece. My sisters are always like, the time, Kaitlyn, that you just say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it, is pretty much every day. So
No,
Um,
Jenny and I were just talking about this on the Rebellion Network. Like the
mhm.
doors are open, people are starting to come in, and it's like we have ideas like that we think it's going to be or it could be, but ultimately it's the people who are going to tell us what they need,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And giving them the space and building their confidence to be able to show up and use their voices and teach, modeling
Yeah.
how to asking for what we need and sharing vulnerably. Like for us, we can do that. We're not therapists. But like no, those are all conversations we have too, to keep it in the unfolding rather than having it so structured from the beginning that now you're limited and not flexible.
Yeah, instead of just siloing things, right? Just
Mhm.
therapy, just this, right? An
Right.
integrative thread, as if you're saying, and how do we weave that together, which is actually a very, I guess, rebellious thing to do. But to me, it just feels like the only thing to do because as we move into these next phases of life, we know that community and connection is going to be the only way to work through those pieces. So again, it's about collaboration and kind of coming together. So yeah.
I've heard I'm not I don't work in the healthcare field anymore. We used to as a massage therapist, but I've heard that those files, when you're in a bigger traditional Western medicine healthcare system, their files on the computer are actually they're locked out from seeing each other's stuff. Like it is so siloed that like they can't like whoa. Like that is so how they divide us, and that all of our practitioners can't see all aspects of ourself.
Yeah.
How that prevents them from really being able to efficiently take in the whole picture as a team and work together to help people move forward and find those connecting points of what is that domino that's being pushed over that is causing all of these problems.
Yeah, for sure. And healing can be defined in so many different ways. And so until we start giving people autonomy and choices and not just telling
Mm.
them that this is how it is, I think that's what's part of the reason what's led us to the state that we're in. And then there's not
Mhm.
enough of us, and because this siloed approach does not work. Maybe it worked for somebody in the past, but it's not going to work moving forward. So, the research is coming out and they're showing by 2030 that our healthcare industry is supposed to be completely different by then.
Yeah, I
Just,
think you mentioned that in episode 1, and that
yep,
is, like, so exciting to me, like,
I
it's gonna
know.
happen in my well, I'll still be alive, but, like, I really think of the benefit that it'll have for my
Yep.
children, how different their experience will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, us as a generation, we can start pioneering and putting things together and then, helping the next ones with autonomy and choices. And I think we're seeing that too, with different generations and what they want and where their value systems lie. Healing really is the key, and
Mhm.
prevention is the key.
Yeah.
And so, let's move towards that. But obviously, our system is structured in a different way. But obviously, that's changing too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think I've read or seen out there somewhere that in 2030, stress is going to be the leading cause of
mm.
disease and
Oh,
all of
it
these other.
already
I mean,
is,
yeah, it
girl.
already is, but I think maybe they're saying people will officially
Acknowledge
acknowledge it,
what they've
which,
known,
yeah,
yeah.
it'll be really fascinating to see, I think, over the next couple of years here, how much things shift. And the idea of stigma, I know in your first book, the second one isn't out yet, but I know that. I don't know if
Working
the
on it.
listeners know that. But in your first book you talk a lot about mental health stigmas and obviously wanting to make mental health accessible and really make it every day. So when you think about the stigmas out there now, have you seen a shift and obviously you're closer to it, but is there a shift happening
Yeah,
on
I think when we look at it, definitely since the pandemic, and again, I can only speak for my spot in Fond du Lac, right? That population of people, but I do talk to others. I definitely know that more males have been reaching out. They're trying to, as a society, I think we're talking about it a little bit more, but that comes with extra layers too. I think generationally, we're seeing a shift, right? Talking about it, again, a value system shift in that dynamic, but the numbers just keep going up, and then there's not enough of us, right? And so it's kind of like this constant tug and this pull, whereas to me, prevention is where we need to go. We need to be assessing mental health from the very beginning. Just like you go in for your annual physical, you should be getting your annual mental health check-in, so that then we could catch things along the way. Interventions could happen along the way, correct? And not to say that we wouldn't have what we have now, but at least they could have learned strategies or tools, been supported along the way. And if we ran into it later in life, they have the potential to be more equipped. We are so behind the game, right? Collective trauma, which we still barely talk about. I mean, I have patients are like, did it just go away, or it's here? You know what I mean? And so we're still in that, and nobody really, it never got wrapped up in a bow, in the sense of, it's still all over the place. And so again, we're seeing a rise in so many arenas, yet we're so behind. So to me, we have to take a different approach if we're going to do anything to actually make a difference.
So are you talking about I'm picturing it like a multifaceted screening process, because I know they're talking about mental health a lot more in the schools, right? So that kids are aware of this, even if their parents aren't aware of it, to teach them the skills. They are trying to teach this in schools. So you also see it as you would see a therapist on top of your primary care physician when the kids go in for a physical.
Yeah, you'd be screened. And if that was needed, right, maybe it would only be kind of like an EAP. Maybe you only need 4 sessions. Maybe it's just emotional regulation. Maybe it's just this, but at least it would be part of it. And I think that that would be a really good start. To me, schools now, since the pandemic, are basically like walking mental health institutions. So, I mean, if you think about that from a psychological perspective, take them out, shove them back in, right? And have that expectation for them to perform the exact same way they did prior, without, again, addressing what really happened. Those were crucial times in development for people. And so again, we're seeing elevated symptoms, all of these things, because as a society, did we really come together to discuss the ramifications of what happened? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's fascinating, because I don't have any kiddos that I watched come out of school and go back in. So my oldest are twins that they were at the end of the high school. They were seniors, and my little guy was in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So his was just like delayed. So I don't really think he noticed it. He loved homeschooling with mom. He thought that was the best thing ever. Still brings it up sometimes.
Yeah.
But for my girls, it was like a very difficult completion time. That like there wasn't like the social celebrations. School was challenging anyways, and now it's a virtual component, and now whoop, you're thrust into adulthood.
You're just done.
Right? So
For sure.
I don't know what those middle kiddos look like, but I know that it probably has affected both of my two sets in that way. And Bodhi was behind in reading when he got into school. I wasn't worried at all, because I am one who believes that kids read when they want to read.
Sure.
But that was a big concern when he got
Yeah.
back to school for the school.
Yep.
Right. So like it has affected, that's just a small example of how my kiddos here, how they were affected by 2020. And it's been different for each of them. So who's helping these kids?
Exactly.
Go back and process that.
And so also think about that sometimes, especially students who live in very traumatic environments, right?
Yeah.
Their only escape was what?
To go to school.
Okay. that's taken away. Then they're home with that 24/7, no place to go. So that's going to amplify symptoms, right? Then amplify taking away that socialization piece. And, just there's so many layers to it. But I think a school and what we're seeing in there and all of the elevated symptoms is telling us something, right? And currently, the structure that we have in place isn't necessarily the most conducive for that. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen. But it's also kind of an exciting time. I don't know. This is totally my jam in the sense of like, all right, let's look at something. Let's make it of value, and then let's bring that forward. And so I know we had sort of mentioned before about the mental health challenge that the Women's Fund did and that I got to be a part of. And that to me was community-based, value-based, and that really came forward. And so to me, that's a very prime example of how you can do those things. And the feedback, I mean, people just loved it. And, the core of that was dedicate a minimum of 20 minutes a day to your mental health. That's the core of it. It sounds extremely easy, but it is a very hard concept. And so when patients work with me, almost the number one thing they say is, I don't have time. So I say, if you don't have time to find 20 minutes, then you're going to have to spend time to find an hour. They find 20 minutes, right? Because they're like, crap.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's part of their, the treatment process. And what I'm basically doing is having them heal themselves and invest in themselves. And so many people were just like, and essentially, I'll go to that next. What we created was just a large support group. That's really, when you think about it, that's what that was. And then you had your teams, or you were solo, you were sectioned off, and then you come back together as a whole unit. And so that was really cool to see. And then how people were just like, wow, it really did help for me to dedicate that 20 minutes a day. And so to me, that's very valuable, and just a project that I've been super happy to be a part of, and to see the outcome and it growing has been pretty cool.
Yeah. This was the second year that the Fond du Lac Area Women's Fund did it. And I will candidly share, I signed up to do it, and then I got really busy and I didn't do it.
Well, it was the month before launch.
But I want to tell you that, well, thanks for being honest, but that's okay too, right? So when we look at it, there's different buckets of people, and life does happen. And so that's okay. But again, the concept is something that you can still carry with you. And if things are busy right now, which I totally get, then maybe it's, I'm going to pick 2 times this week, right? And just do 20 minutes. And so you get to play with it in a way that feels good to you. But there's people that sign up and that don't, and that's okay too. I don't really think much about
think
it.
I need to challenge you on this, though. I think you probably did it. You just didn't document it.
That's true.
Because Jenny loves to talk to the trees. No, she really does. So she, like, when I'm texting her, she's like, "Oh, I'll, like, I'm gonna be out with my chickens for a little while, So she's like, it's like she's cutting it off. She's like, and that is taking care of your mental health. That's saying I can't communicate outside of me right now. That's enough sometimes to be able to set the boundary to do that. That's winning. Just because you didn't put it in an app or write it down on a piece of paper or report it anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like I've gone through this evolution. For the longest time, it was very much like, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have my coffee and I'm going to journal and then I'm going to meditate and then I might do a few, yoga poses or whatever. And it was very much just checking the boxes, right? And like, okay, this is going to help me feel better.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it's like, okay, what am I doing this for? Is this really helping me? And so I kind of threw that out the window. And I mean, I do think you're right, Erin. I do it in different ways. And I think finding out what works for us, that's going to be different depending on where you are, what, just what's going on in your life, what's gone on in your past. So yeah, thank you for calling me out on that, because I didn't document it. I wasn't like, all right, 20 minutes, go, but I would take time to just like, sure, go, feed and water the chickens, but also what else was I doing in there? That was a mental break. So I think,
Mhm.
yeah, defining it for you, what feels good for you, what's helping you step away from the chaos of the day, and I think part of it is, I mean, there's so much around self-care, right? What is self-care? For me, it's not, baths and whatever.
Mhm.
It is just like sitting on the deck and watching the birds
And that's what works for you. Or sleeping in.
or
There
sleeping
was that
in.
morning that you're like, "Yeah, I'm not I'm awake, but I'm not gonna get up yet." Like, she just
Yeah.
stayed in bed and
Yeah.
had that time to herself, like, that's amazing. And I have a friend who
Mhm.
loves baths, like, that is
Yeah.
her jam. That's the way she takes care of herself.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, like, remind people too of when they are doing those
Mhm.
things to, like, help them get back into it. There's no perfect way to do this.
Right.
Mm-mm. And that's what I mean about like the support group piece. So technically you were a part of the group and you
Yeah.
were doing it, but you did it your way and you didn't
Yeah.
have to. And that's the other thing. You don't have to be a part of the challenge and those pieces, but you can. And so it's just an opportunity to explore those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's been fun to see. And again, the feedback is just really kind of giving people that space to be reflective. And maybe they're already doing it, but they didn't notice,
That
right?
they
Kind
were
of like
doing
what
it,
just
yeah.
happened here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe they've never done it before, and
Exactly.
then they had an opportunity to try, and they're like, "Hey, this is pretty good,"
Yeah.
Like, maybe they won't be able to continue 20 minutes a day, but they can start. I love habit stacking. I know a lot of people don't know what habit stacking is, but find that time when it's double down on your chicken time. Like, you could run down there, you could run out there, water and feed your chickens and get back in the house, or you could make it
Exactly.
a 20-minute, like, pleasant time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the wrap up event was so like you couldn't have scripted those speeches
Mm.
any better. Like I was standing behind everybody who came up and my mouth was like just and not that I didn't think they had it in them or that everybody that like it wasn't that. It was just this really beautiful thing, very
Mm.
organic that happened because everybody was speaking about what it meant from them from the core. And so that
Right.
to me is like what I base a ton of my stuff around is my value system, which I guess happens to be very rebellious, but like I want to add integrity and value, and people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm,
so we have this
mhm.
really cool unique opportunity to do that, and like I was just blown away, and so that was really cool to see. I also rebelliously wrote a letter to the governor because I was like, you know what, why not? The
Yeah.
the first year, the previous ED and I had talked about, developing this. And I was like, well, let's do it in honor of Tony Evers declaring the year of mental health, right? And so I just,
Mm.
crafted this lovely letter. And I feel like I wish it was like in Harry Potter where like the owl delivered it. And I
I
but
love you, Caitlin.
it was like the most millennial thing, submitted it to the website, whatever. But it was really cool because I think that again added value to the programming, that we created something in his honor. And then for him to be there was just kind of icing on the cake.
Do you have that recorded anywhere? All those speeches?
No,
No.
it's the one thing everybody's just like,
Oh!
I
what?
know. Yep. I thought about a lot of things and planned a lot of things, but I didn't. And
Yeah.
again, yes, people are like, we should have, and I totally get it. But also, I don't know. It was, you kind of had to be there. I mean, it
Yeah.
was so powerful, which again correlates back to what we were previously talking about community, connection, and healing together in a way that's unique, that's different, right? That's innovative. Now, this initiative, there's so many things that can be improved upon, right? That's kind of the cool piece of when you're developing stuff. But ultimately, at the core of it, there's a lot of value, there's community, and essentially what we created was a big support group. So the clinician in me just is very happy.
Well, congrats.
Do you think that people will be carrying that forward, the community aspect? Like, I know they had the personal experience of it, and maybe they'll play with it in the next year. But have you heard any whispers about how they would like to continue the community?
Yeah, I mean, a ton of the feedback was, we're going to keep our groups going, or the journal really helped, or those different things. But I think as an organization, at least the Women's Fund will want to think about how do they want to carry that forward, and how does that value align, if it does, with our mission, and how you want to do this to keep it moving, or maybe, somebody else do it in a way. We saw a lot of different organizations and people that came together to do the challenge or register or sign up for the challenge. It's okay if you, sporadically submitted your minutes, didn't, or you were on top of it. Like, all of that is totally cool. It's just about kind of being a part of it. And so we saw many different avenues. And so to me, I think it's a valuable asset. And the more we can do those things, that's not just for the month of May, I think the better we can be as a community, for sure. Again, it's about getting innovative and creative, right? And the research is showing that too. As things are changing, the staleness and the siloedness and the ineffectiveness of our current system with mental health is changing. And so you're either going to need to get on board, or you're going to be left kind of in the dust.
Right. Well, and using technology to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we keep hearing, and I would love your perspective on around social media. Like, Jenny and I have done a lot of reading and listening to things and how social media is affecting people, and it is heavily weighed to the negative.
Yeah.
Can you share your perspective on that, and then how could we use technology to change that?
I think technology is going to be this beast, right? Where, look at us, you and I are in completely different towns, right? But we can do this and we can make it work. So to me, this type of social media and what you're producing and all of that can be very effective done properly. Now, I think, again, when we're dealing with younger generations, like, to me, what I hear a lot of in my office is they can't escape it. So, like, where you and I, we could go home from school, we knew the next day might be bad because somebody could have been picking on us or this or that. But now it is like Snapchat, it's Instagram, it's this, it's that. It's like this constant barrage of social media not being able to escape it. So I think from a clinical lens and a patient lens, depending on your age range, it can be very detrimental, right? And so my hope is that we use it a little bit more smarter and recognize age ranges and things that are happening. But I'm not necessarily sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. So then what happens in the meantime? Whose responsibility is it to manage some of those things, right? Is it the school districts? Is it the parents? Is it the child who doesn't have autonomy? I still think there's so many questions regarding social media. But to me, I think it can be a really cool thing. I mean, I sell my book online. I meet all these different people, right? And get to do different things. I think it can be fun, but I also know the other side of it.
What are things that we can do to make it a healthier space for people's mental health? For example, one of the things that we would love to do is like get rid of that like button, just because I think it is shorthanding connection, because it's like, oh, because I like this, you saw that I like this, and that's all I have to do for you to know that I saw it. And I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to smile at you. I don't have nothing. It's just like I clicked a button, and that was my connecting point. And then you don't have to go any deeper. And I see that becoming more and more and more, is that the people are using that, and it's been this way for a long time. I know I need to say that, but I've noticed I'm doing it now too, and that upsets me. So like I force myself to like, no, slow down, comment, like really notice what's happening in this picture, or why am I liking this, So like I think the like button, it needs to go away completely. That's not something we can do on Mighty Network, which is why Erin will keep pushing for our own app where we can get rid of the damn like button. But Any other ideas that you have? Because we have a few of them, but we're willing to learn from you.
Mm-hmm. Again, it makes me go back to thinking of transactional interactions versus value-based interactions. So I think what I would say to that is, although I know you're producing valuable content and you're coming from a place of integrity in those things, I know that when you're putting it out there, is that coming through? Right. And then how do you integrate that into a value based approach versus a clickbait approach and quick like this, right? And so is my target audience right now more of this value based? It might be a little bit slower, whatever you're looking for. That's totally cool. And that's what I've done. My audience has been all organic. And so you're like, oh, you're supposed to do a color scheme and this. And I'm just like, well, but my page, I just want it to be me. Like, I just want them to know that this is Kaitlyn, that this is what you're going to get. And so that has been my approach. I feel confident in that. And so that's what I would say is that if that's your approach and you can come from this value-based thing, then don't worry about those other pieces, because naturally it will fall into place if the content is there.
Yeah, I'm talking engagement between the members on our network. So it's not about brand. It's about how do you get people actually connecting to each other when they're in the same space, right? So it would be fascinating if we could just take away the like button for a week and see how people actually change their engagement with each other. Because now you have to start talking to each other. Or do you just ignore it completely? I don't know.
Yeah, that to me is what you're gonna have to play with, right?
Yeah.
And so we might keep it this way for a little bit, but we're hoping this other approach happens. And then how do I change that approach with that? So getting people to connect with one another, right? I'm going to come from the clinical lens here. That's going to be rapport building. That's what I would say. So are they building rapport in one another, or are you hoping that they build rapport in one another based upon just being in a group together? Because if you're hoping for that, well, then what I would say is if we go back to the mental health one, which was a big community one, right? They weren't necessarily connected unless through the social media pieces, or if, again, maybe next year having more meetups and having that. And so to me, you're going to have to think about how do they build rapport in order to make the fabric weave together, and not that I want them to build rapport without that coming together.
It is a really important thing that I think we need to look at. And I don't think it's going to go away. And we can't just demonize social media. And we need to work with it to heal and to find ways to connect within it. One of our other ideas is using hashtags to ask for what you need. So, I watch this in my daughters, like, what are they looking for on Instagram when they post it? And their friend group, it's not just a like, they always do these short little comments like fire or like you're beautiful or, like these quick, like they could just be like, how would you say that? Like captioned or whatever, where they could just like use the same ones, but at least they're trying to use words to like talk to each other. But my question, like when I watch my children on social media, is like, what type of engagement are you looking for when you post this? And then I was like, you might as well ask yourself the same question. What am I looking for when I post this? And ask, like, am I looking for support? Do I need people to like give me some advice? Well, then why am I not asking for advice? If I am I just need to be seen and I'm celebrating something, why am I not just saying, please celebrate with me? I think we could really use those to tell people what type of engagement we're looking for, and then they know how to show up for us. And we should be doing this in our own relationships anyway. But wouldn't it be great if we could practice that online and show up better for people?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. And I think it's just something that will happen organically-ish, but you're going to have to play with it a little bit and see what works, what doesn't work. And I would just fall back on that value system. Am I doing this out of that value system. So some of my stuff on my professional personal page is just because I like it, right? I want to post about the summer solstice. I want to
Mhm.
post a book quotes because that makes me feel good, right? But that is just me also being authentic to myself. And yes, I know the strategies. I have all the things. I have the colors. I know what I'm supposed to do and, what they tell you, but I'm just not ready for it. I'm not ready to commit to it. And so
Or you're just way too eclectic to be narrowed down into like a tiny little box. And that is part of the reason I love you, Kaitlyn, is that you're just like, no, I love all of this. And this
I
is
do.
all of me.
Yes. And so you get to have all those pieces. But I also
Yes.
think that pre-COVID, right? And I think we talked about this in the first episode, I think, a little bit more of like the clinician that I was prior to COVID and coming out was like sitting on my hands and being very structured and, oh goodness, you
Mhm.
have to do this. And now since COVID, it's just like, I'm going to integrate it all. Right? You're going to
Right.
get me. You're going to get that professional piece, but you're also going to get that honest piece. And you're also going to know that I do like the moon and that and Harry Potter. And I can still do all of those things and still be myself. And so that to me is what I try to pull forward in all that I do in the social media pieces. I mean, I think again, at times you create you create something, right? And you're like, this one's gonna be so great. Everybody's gonna love it. And you get like 2 likes, right? And you're like, oh, I spent, and I get that, but then I just started, and then I went back to my value system and I'm like, I don't
Right.
need likes. Like, I like this. And then I went back to when I taught college, right? So when my first master's degree, I also got to teach gender and women's studies. And I remember I would put all this effort into a lesson plan and be like, this is going to be the best lesson plan ever. Everybody's going to resonate. And then the ones that I didn't do that with, right, they
Mhm.
resonated. And that happened a lot, I think, in the beginning of therapy too. I would come in so prepared and it was so structured and I was just following all the rules. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And so again, I think about that with social media too. I'm just like, no, I'm just gonna do it my way because that's what feels good.
I mean, whether you are someone posting content or someone consuming content, I think the questions that I'm taking away is just pausing for a bit to ask, what am I really looking for in this? And obviously, for those posting as a business, it's going to be slightly different than those that are consuming it. But, when I stop and think about why I pick up my phone and maybe doom scroll, as they call it, sometimes it is because I need to just disconnect from what I'm feeling. And then other times, and I would say most of the time, it's I'm looking for some sort of connection, right? I'm looking to find something that gets me excited or somebody to reach out to. Like that's the place to go for it now. And we were talking a little bit about this, I think at the launch party, and I saw another post just this morning about like it can be really hard to know where to make friends.
Mm.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
And especially as we get older, and the post that I saw this morning was actually, you know, how to make friends when you really don't want to leave your house, and not in this like depressed way, but that I mean that is kind of the case for some, but for
Yeah.
me it's just like I'm completely content, at home with my chickens, talking to trees, whatever, playing in the dirt, but
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Like for me,
Mhm.
I'll make plans and then it's just like, oh, I'd rather just be at home. I mean, I
Mhm.
love connecting with people. So I think the social aspect of it is people looking for connection in a world where disconnection is the convenience.
Mhm.
What advice do you give to people who are, adults that don't have friends and are looking to make friends? I
Yeah.
specifically, let's even make it specifically to our area because there's not a whole lot going on here.
Yeah. And so, what I tell people too is what we try to do. Again, I always try to go back to the basics. Let's define what a friend is to you. Okay. So, we're going to define that. But then this is kind of the twist of all of it. Okay. So, those are the values that you want in a friend. But now look at yourself. Now we're going to look at yourself. What kind of friend are you? Are
Mhm.
you showing up with honesty, but you're asking that, yet you've lied about X, Y, and Z, right? This is when I pull in all the stops, right? Okay, well,
Right.
that doesn't align, right? And so,
Mhm.
again, I try to take this very much value based approach of the definition of friendship, how you show up as a friendship, and then really discuss the evolution of friendships because we haven't totally been taught about that. You know, some people are reasons and seasons, is kind of like how I like to explain it. And a lot of times, what I'm seeing now with the adult population is they're, you know, getting to a certain age where they don't connect with those people that they did in high school or their college friends, or we don't have anything in common anymore except for that we know each other. And so now it
Mhm.
becomes a task instead of enjoyment, right? And so it's untangling those pieces first. With the younger population too, that value system piece works really well. And actually, what I would tell you is a lot of the kiddos and middle schoolers and they know what they're looking for, but they don't necessarily have the reciprocity yet of what's happening, so that they can, and they don't necessarily have the autonomy or the words to be like, well, I don't necessarily want to hang out with that person because everybody else is. So it's a little bit different, but I do take the same approach, and I just try to ask, okay, well, does that person bring joy into your life? All right, well, now let's count flags instead. So red flags, green flags, yellow flags. Sometimes we like to make up colors like orange, and can this one be a purple flag? Okay, well, what does that mean? But yes. And so your next 5 interactions that you have with them, whether that's on the phone, in person, or this and that, what did that feel like? And
Mhm.
so trying to get them to reconnect with self and really, is this a reason or a season? And then what can we do to kind of get through that? Because friendships are relationships
Mm.
and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
hard and they're hard work. And so that's the main approach that I do. But I think, again, any relationship, specifically friendships, we're constantly talking about that because it's constantly evolving. And I think at the core of it, what I do is give people permission to say, this might not fit anymore, but then what can I do, right? In the meantime, to connect with other people. So I use a lot of stuff. Well, can you join this support group? Right, online, can you do this? And so using the technology piece to bring that in. So one lady that I work with, she didn't want to do a book club anywhere in town. She found one in Milwaukee, worked for her. Now she's off to the races, right? And so what we talked about, it's going to be awkward when you go in there, right? You have social anxiety. I get
Mhm.
it. Here are a few things we can do. So that's kind of what they ended up doing. Can you join the community group, right? Or the mental health challenge as a way? Can you find some people to do that? That could have brought, and it did bring some people together, right? Will you go to this event? Will you do this? And sometimes what people are actually doing now is going by themselves to dinner, a movie. And so to me, it's really about giving them permission to be able to explore something different that they've probably deep down wanted to do for a long time.
I think a lot of people are going to connect to what you said about the friends that you've always had.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the friends from college or high school, your first job, whatever it is, those people that you are still connected with. I think there's an opportunity there if the values around the friendship you want is intimacy and vulnerability, which is where Jenny and I go with things. And I know that's not everybody's goal,
Right.
but I do think that is the I think it's a fundamental need in us to be seen and to see others. And maybe people aren't ready to go there. I'm going to rephrase it that way. Maybe they're not ready to go there. But if you are ready to go there and you have that group of friends, I just want to say that it does. Just because you had that set of rules and how you engage with that group of friends doesn't mean that can't change.
Yeah.
But you have to be brave enough to be the
Yeah.
one to go first and
Yes.
bring the vulnerability and go there with them. And they're going to be like, what the? You're doing what? Wait a
Mm-hmm.
minute, we don't go to that level.
Yeah.
Or they may have always felt like they didn't really know you and now they have an opportunity to get to know you, you know? So you never know what's underlying in all those other friends that you have in that group, but I do believe at our core we really do want
Yeah.
intimacy and vulnerability.
Absolutely. And I would say since losing my brother and that grief process, it's almost changed all of my friendship dynamics, which is another grief on top of grief, on top of grief, putting those layers together because I don't feel connected in the same way, right? I'm not the same person, right? So the expectations that a lot of people have had for me, I'm not showing up in that way anymore. So it's okay to be frustrated with that, right? But again, my value system has changed when it's come to some of those types of interactions, which also can, correlate to grief. And so that's another layer that I bring into it as well, that big shifts in our life. And when we get healthier, because this is the other side of healing, I think, again, that's not talked about as much because we want to talk about the good stuff, right? And how transformative it is and this, and it is, and it is, but it's also can be isolating and it puts you into this different lane. So if you've been in this lane of toxicity and unhealthiness, now you're in this lane trying to create that. Well, we can't bring the garbage from that one into this one, right? We need to have a recycling bin.
One can hope. But usually, some of it usually does come along, though, right? Like it's a process. Each time we move over, we get rid of a little.
Yes, for sure. But again, that when it comes to friendships, and depending on what type of friendship that is, it doesn't always happen. And so we have to be okay with that because that's going to bring grief then too. And but I also think friendships are a safe place to start if they're a safe person, right? With some of, if you're learning how to communicate better, or, I want to have this conversation. I want to be authentic. I didn't like this. And so sometimes in sessions, it's, Kaitlyn, how do I talk to my friend about this? Because we've had X, Y, and Z, right? And I always tell everybody, your audience best. So let's figure out the audience and then how we can work within that too, to have those conversations. And I would say that sometimes it really does work and then it just makes it better, right? And then sometimes we have to take a little bit of a break, right? And then maybe we come back around. And so it's all a little bit different. But as we're healing and the people that want to be in that lane with us or on that journey, they're going to come along for the ride. But they also may need a little space too. And we just have to be okay with that.
And sometimes it's a long break.
Yeah.
It can be years where you need to take those different paths to we evolve on those different paths. And then sometimes you can come back together and sometimes you don't, but that's the hardest thing is like the unknowing, like, you love this person and you desire a certain relationship with them. Right. But you just have to, this is for me where I have to sink into my faith. Like, they're doing what they need to be doing. I'm doing what I need to be doing. And maybe one day,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how beautiful is that too? Because again, a part of me is always just like, whatever's meant to happen is going to happen and it's going to come together if it's supposed to be. So again, like you're saying, leaning into your faith, that's what I lean into too. And I think again, I am confident and people can see that, but that's part of that confidence is just, I know it's going to be okay. I am fighting against myself right now. And so how do I settle back into my nervous system and lean on to the pieces that I know are going to be all right. But it's easy to say as it comes out of my mouth, but a very hard thing to practice.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what age you're at.
Boundaries, the worst. They really are the worst part of this whole process is learning how to set boundaries and maintaining them.
Oh, they're my favorite. They're my favorite. Listen, having good boundaries is a form of self-respect. That is what I teach everybody. It's really about you and figuring out.
Wait a minute. I don't believe this. Hold on a second. I could get that you would love teaching it. I can get that you would love seeing the results of it. But when you have to do it yourself and you have to create a new boundary, you love doing that?
Yes.
Wow.
Because I'm living up to what I'm preaching. So
good for you.
Like I said in that first episode, I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And so if I can stick with that boundary and I go through, yes, you're going to have all the things that lead up to it, but I'm very rooted in it. And I like to practice it so that I then can say to my patients or people that I work with, well, here's a recent situation that happened. Here's how I did it. And then we can also play with it a little bit too. So do you think I could have done that better? Right? How would
Yeah.
you have approached that
Mhm.
situation? Because we're mirroring one another. Yes, it's hard, but every time I do it, the reward that comes after it, again, is what
It
was
makes
supposed to happen.
so the
Yeah.
reward is what you love.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn how to love it through you. Like, if
Yeah.
you love it, then like help me there, because
Yeah.
I believe in that. Yes, practice what you preach. If you're gonna be encouraging other people to do it, you better be willing to step in that mud too, right?
Yep.
But like I would never say I love doing it. It's so disruptive. And it actually can be like, I don't even know if disruptive is a strong enough word, especially if you're taking a relationship that has had no boundaries. The
Mhm.
first boundary you lay in there could blow up a lot, right? And now you're left with pieces laying around. So my experience of it has been more terrifying than
Mm.
anything.
Yeah.
And what I prefer to do, my husband and I talk about this a lot, is that we normalized talking about our relationship. It is
Yes.
not like something that we do once a year. We check in with each other regularly. Like, and
Mhm.
if something feels off or something shifting, we talk about it immediately. We don't wait. We don't let it fester. We ask what type of support they need. We ask for the type of support we do need, right? Because like, the longer you wait to set that boundary, to have that courageous conversation, the bigger the blow up. Is my
Mhm.
experience, but maybe not true for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as we were talking before, I think the biggest thing that was standing out to me is exactly what you said. Normalizing talking about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like the dynamic, not just between partners, but husband, wife, romantic partners, but also friendships.
Mm-hmm.
I think even coworker dynamics. There's so much that I've noticed in my experience and supporting and listening to others where we just kind of dance around the edges. And it is scary to step into that
Mhm.
if you haven't done it before, if it hasn't
For
been
sure.
talked about before
Yep.
on a consistent basis. But absolutely agree that that
And
can be the first step
yep, and
to,
you would do a slow creep into it, right?
yeah.
And so it's not like you would just have that huge boundary right away because you're not prepared for that, right? And
Yeah.
so we're going to practice this conversation. We're going to start using I statements. We're not going to respond immediately, right? So we're going to build up to it in a way that's obviously safe and potentially can kind of get you to your outcome. But it's absolutely frightening at any age, but also once you learn the skill, just like anything, like a muscle, right? The more
Yeah.
you work on the boundaries and knowing that this fits and it doesn't, the easier, quote unquote, I'll say, it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think one of the things that I always appreciate in conversation with you, Erin, too, is how you talk about co-creating boundaries in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like there's a ton out there about, having your boundaries and enforcing your boundaries and knowing them and of course practicing what you preach, everything that we've been talking about. But I think there's a nuance in relationship where, especially if there have not been boundaries, it needs to be a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you want to remain in relationship versus just shutting the door and taking
Right.
those pauses, long or short.
Right.
So co-creating boundaries, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that.
Me either. I'm
it,
listening.
it just feels better. I think I found that word when Matt and I in our relationship, so I'm a communicator. My husband is not a big communicator.
Sure.
And for somebody who always felt like they had to like set the tone and set the pace, and so I was always my ideas going into boundaries or into rules and relationship or whatever. So it was me feeling like the responsibility was all on me as the communicator, that I'm like, no, I want you to do this with me. I need you to speak up for yourself. I need to know. So where are these boundaries? I can't create them for you. Let's co-create where this boundary is together, right? And maybe when you have two people that can stand up for themselves, it wouldn't seem as obvious of a need. but because we're kind of opposites,
Sure.
he needed to do it for me, and I needed him to do it for him. You know, like
Yep.
we. So it's, I don't know if I said that last sentence right. So if it came out wrong,
And we know what you meant. Yeah.
we both needed it. We
Yeah.
both needed it, and it has helped him find his voice.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think, just to add a point of clarity, when you say opposites, you're really speaking to like when you get in conflict. 'Cause when you think about when are boundaries, when do they come up and when are they needed? It's primarily in conflict, whether that be a tough conversation or a big blow up, right?
Mhm.
So when you say opposites, that's really just, I guess, one's reaction to.
Yeah, that's our nervous system. Jenny and I you talk a lot about the nervous system. So Matt's a shutdown. He goes the parasympathetic shutdown route, and I activate. So literally, my brain speeds up, and my mouth speeds up, and
Yeah.
it's all right there for me at my fingertips. And when he feels conflict or stress or tension in the relationship, as conflict shows up, his brain shuts down and his voice shuts down. So he can't find his tip of tongue really bad. Like he just can't get the words out. That's not fair. That's not a fair fight. When his brain is doing that and my brain is doing this, I could just steamroll him, And
Yeah.
that did not feel good to me. It certainly didn't feel good to him, right? So in that sense, we're opposites that way generally in our life, but we're also that way when we are triggered or activated, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It's the easier way to see it if you look at how someone responds to being triggered, it can maybe show you like where that pattern is in their chronic nervous system, right?
Yeah.
But that's good, these conversations. And then, like you said, I heard you say he's developed more autonomy out of that. That's the hope in all of it, is that you can be more autonomous with conversations. And for these other hiding behind that computer screen and not feeling that connection is not going to work. If we're looking for connection, which is what we're really here to do, is to connect to one another in a healthier way that we haven't been taught. So that's cool, and that's working. And then so keep doing those things. And I would say, as long as it's safe enough to practice it in there. So if you were in my office, okay, what's safe enough with our next person, right? Because your audience best. And so we would try to work off of those interactions so that you could keep doing it. And again, that confidence or that boundary muscle would just get stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I think I can't remember where I read it or listened to it, because I listened to a lot of audiobooks as well. But there was
I have a question off topic.
Okay.
Do you finish audiobooks?
I do.
Okay.
Sometimes it just takes a really long time.
Okay.
But it's the same.
No, sorry, I just had to know because I've never asked, because we talk a lot about her stack of books that she's bought and has maybe thumbed through or read a little bit of.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. Sorry, pardon the interruption.
No, all good.
Carry on.
I finish more audiobooks than I do actual tangible.
Okay.
I love them both though.
Okay.
So, but I finish more because I listen while I'm mowing lawn or on a drive somewhere.
There's absolutely no judgment on this side, just so y'all know. I'm not judging. I'm just trying to learn the pieces here.
Actually, so the book, it just came to me because I was listening to it while mowing a couple weeks ago, and I have not finished it yet. Maybe in the next mow session, which will happen this week.
You rebel, you.
Right?
It's Fierce Intimacy, author I cannot recall, but in there, he talks about how you can, instead of like when in conversation, immediately throwing up a hand or throwing up that flag, to your point, Kaitlyn, saying boundary, like, and stopping people in their tracks. What really resonated with me and what he shared is Terry Real. Thank you for bringing it up. Was how he said, just noticing the boundaries and being aware of it, and then kind of coming back and maybe, I'm probably more in Matt's realm as far as my nervous system and how I react to conflict and triggers and all of that. Knowing that is the very first step into being able to show up and just honor where you're at and have those conversations. But anyway, the conversation around just noticing the boundary and saying like, okay, nope, this is a boundary. And and again, I'm not talking about extreme situations here. Obviously, if safety is of concern, shut it down to the best of your ability. But in other instances in relationships where it's maybe minor offenses, where it's like, nope, that didn't feel good that they said this or that they did this, instead of, in my mind, like suddenly throwing up that wall or door. And I know you'll say they don't have to be walls. It's just been helpful to notice, all right, this is something that I really need to work on. Clearly sharing this is a boundary for me. So it is a process. It doesn't just happen. And I think the more we think about it and reflect on it in the moment of interacting and in conversation, and then have the discussions around what kind of relationship we want to nurture, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, it can change everything.
Absolutely. Yep. And learning how to properly fight with one another, right? And because there's going to be. So the fair fighting rules is what I give almost everybody. And then I just talk about the analogy of setting the table. Are you going to set the table when you're angry, right? Like, how can we do this and have those expectations, fight fairly, respect one another, right? When that's happening. And maybe your partner does need until tomorrow. Okay. But then you come back to it at 8 a.m. at the table or whatever that looks like for you guys to solve it, right? And so, again, people practice that. And again, it's a little awkward. I tell everybody the first couple times, but once you get it down, then you're like, oh, okay, this feels good. Let's keep going with that.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, what do we really want to make sure people walk away with from this conversation today?
What does Kaitlyn want?
I want you to know that healing is absolutely possible, that everybody's journey is unique and that it's different. But that if you do the inner work, which would be maybe finding that inner rebel or healing whatever needs to be healed on the inside, looking at relationships, having better boundaries with self, and acknowledging and just being vulnerable that it's okay to ask for help or it's okay to lean on each other, that would kind of be my biggest takeaways. What do you guys think? Or what do you ladies think?
I think what I'm walking away with most, it isn't like this new idea, but it's just the reminder that making mental health an everyday thing, whether that's just reflection. I think you said it earlier. You can spend 20 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is today, or that hour plus, in a session, or maybe it's even longer in a scenario that doesn't feel the greatest. There's just so much. It's not even about efficiency. It's about showing up more authentically as you.
For sure.
And making the time to do that. And I think that's mental health, that's conversation about relationship. There's just so many different nuggets where it's standing out to me that when we make time, which we have to make time, we can't, I've heard this whole, well, find time. It just doesn't, we only have those 24 hours a day. And if you think about, something breaks or there's a minor, emergency and you have to pivot from your day, you make time to address it because it's important. So how can we make time to prioritize our mental health and what we need, and make time to prioritize our relationships versus just clicking that like button?
Love that.
I'm left with more questions as usual. My mind is like swirling around what you said about the screening for children. And I guess I would say normalize you described normalizing mental health checkups, right? And it's trying to blur that with what is happening to children as they age and don't know how to connect.
Yeah.
There's something there that my mind is trying to tease out that I think is really important. And the community is a piece of that. I think that's what's coming up for me.
I think that's going to have to be a whole nother conversation.
I'm not starting a
Yes.
question.
No, I know.
I'm sorry,
I'm
but
just-
this is what happens to me at the end is I'm left with all these questions going
But
for the rest of the day.
I agree. When I think about my nieces and nephews and godchildren and just the littles in my life, it is absolutely something where I want to model, but I also want to support them with where they're at. And I think there's so much going on that was not the way it was for myself, and imagine for you two as well growing
Right.
up. I mean, it was a different, it's just always going to be different with all of the different dynamics. So I 100% would love to pick this up.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you guys do a Red Couch Rebel with a teenage group, right? You get 5 of them together, right?
Oh, that would be great.
And find out what their inner rebel is. And so that
if we could get them all in the same room, at least we'd be letting them look. If we let them look at a screen, maybe then they would talk.
Maybe. But I have to tell you, our last fall, our biggest group was our teenagers. And
you said that. You did. Yeah.
For the yoga mindfulness stuff. And what I will tell you is the day that we dedicated towards friendships was the most impactful. That's what everybody had said too. So my population, I was a defiant teen, go figure. I think we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I naturally give me a defiant child and they're my jam. But I truthfully think you could get quite a bit of information out of them. So again, just an idea of how you could potentially bring it full circle. And again, I used the value. And so to bring this full circle too, I think, again, if people can walk away with how can we reconnect to our values, and when we're in alignment with that is rebellious. And so we're doing all of these things and which equate to healing.
Yeah.
Great.
Love that.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaitlyn. Love where we went. It was so great. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your skills too. That's so needed.
Do you want to just share a little bit where if someone wanted to find out more about you, where they could find more information?
Sure. I would just Google Kaitlyn Kenealy or Kenealy Counseling. You're going to get a lot of different things that pop up. I'm currently full right now as far as the therapy piece. But as far as my author journey, it's on my Kenealy Counseling website. Or again, just type in Kaitlyn Kenealy and you'll get the link to some of those things. So that would probably be your best way to find me. Or you can follow me on Instagram too. It's Kaitlyn Kenealy. And then interact with my eclectic posts.
Love it. Yes, love it. I cannot wait. I'm on the edge of the couch here for your book, for more to come out about your next book. So
yes.
We'll be following along.
I'm super excited.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, Kaitlyn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Red Couch. We would love if you would head on over and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It helps us tremendously as we rebel against the status quo of disconnection. We need you. We appreciate you. You can also head on over to our website, redcouchrebels.com, to send us a note and explore your inner rebel with us on our online network. We'd love to see you there.